when Paul sent me an email 2 days ago to ask if I can do this, Keepin It Real, I was literally in bed. I was in bed and unable to get up for more than 5 or 10 minutes, but I saw Michael Nineheis, who I know from Stanwich Church and my work in Haiti, and I felt inspired to say yes and figure out a way to get here. I'm in the process of recovering for the last 3 months from pretty serious medical stuff. I've had 2 open heart surgeries in the last 6 weeks from the front and back, and they replaced my entire aorta. So I'll come back to that at the end, but that's kind of so if I cough and stuff, that's what I'm recovering from here. What I want to talk about, I'll give my testimony, but I think the angle I want to go about, because of where I am right now, is the quality and value of fellowship, of churches, of the church, which means the people in the church. And as difficult it is for us as men at times, who, unlike the millennials, we want to be so dependent and take care of ourselves and give to others. But there are times in your life that you just can't, and you have to rely on others. And that's a period of time I'm going through. So very quickly, my testimony is raised in a blue-collar family in Stamford, Connecticut, raised a Catholic. Church got trumped by hockey and everything else. Went to a Catholic high school, Jesuit college, kind of tier 2 schools, B student. Came out, started in the banking world, but on the operation side in a large bank, but in the operation side in the private bank. And then through a series of luck or whatever else, I was able to, in a very short period of time, move from those positions to being a very senior banker on the investment banking side at Citi, covering the private equity firms. And from there, went up to Boston with my boss to run the leverage finance businesses for Fleet and Bank Boston when they merged, which at the time was a very competitive, large organization. So I wake up and I'm 38 years old, making multi-millions of dollars running these large businesses, and never quite figure out why, but never once did I ever attribute these successes to God or to Jesus. It was always, I had an edge, but I couldn't figure out what the edge was. Because certainly everyone I was competing against was far more educated and learned and so on and so forth. I also, during that time, was married, had 3 beautiful kids. And so, again, on the surface, everything seemed perfect to the outside world. But there was a huge hole missing in my life. And it was really around my relationship with my wife. Complete lack of intimacy for the prior 7 years. There were no affairs, everything else, but there was just something missing. And not really, I always believed in Jesus. I always believed him to be my Savior, but never really understanding what that meant. I kept saying I'm giving up self to this person to try to please this person. Went through tons of therapy, learned about Eastern religions, yoga, so on and so forth, and it was all good. I knew the DSM-V4 backwards and forwards and different psych analysis, and it all helped me understand myself better. But it was just that. It was you helping yourself. And so I was never able to kind of let go because I was scared to death if you let go that there was no safety net below you to catch you. So I made a decision at that time to leave my ex-wife, thinking, just be co-parents and there's plenty of money and everything will be okay. And that was kind of the beginning of the end of that sort of part of my life. And everything I valued, the money, the power, the prestige, I felt a little like Job. One thing at a time was being taken away from me. Everything I valued, and including my children, who I just cherished. And so I went through a real drought for 6-7 years, not having my children in my life at all, and having to go to games and drive all the way to Boston because I had to move back to New York to get a job, and be able to watch my children play sports but not even being allowed to speak with them. And so really just kind of faking it along the way. God in his mysterious ways. There is a restaurant, well, it used to be a restaurant in Norwalk called Match Restaurant, and there was a bartender there, and same age as my oldest daughter, who's now 27. And she said, listen, why don't you come up to this church? I'm going to dance at Stanwich Church. And so I went up there, and the moment I walked in that church, I couldn't even get through a service, just weeping time and time again. This happened for 3 or 4 sessions. So I knew something was going on there, and I knew I needed more to keep this just to keep moving one foot in front of the other. But I was a pain in the butt, skeptical, cynical, especially around born-again Christians. Anybody who's proclaimed themselves to be a born-again, right away my antenna went up. And I remember my first Bible study ever was up at Emmaus Hall at Stanwich. And those who don't know, it's a big hall, and there was probably 10 or 12 tables at night and 8 to 10 people sitting around it. And the first topic I ever heard about, again, understanding my visceral reaction to born-again Christians, was evangelism. And the gentleman who I think spoke here before was Steve Gilbert. And he was the associate pastor at the time, speaking of it. And he had a wonderful sermon, and I'm sure it made all the sense in the world today, listen to it. But at the time, it was about how to bring Jesus into other people's lives. But I was just so angry about it, and I couldn't do it, so I just, in my obnoxious way, stood up in the back and said, I'm sorry. And there was no question and answer time. I don't get it. I don't understand what gives you the right to tell us about Jesus. Why do you have the authority? Why do you have the right to infringe upon other people's lives? And Jesus is a commodity, and everybody's selling them. They don't know what the heck they're even selling. The place went dead quiet. Wondering who this obnoxious guy in the back was. Fortunately for Steve, Chuck Davis got up and said, Steve, I got this one. And I think what Chuck said to me that day is the reason I stayed in these churches for so long. And what his comment was, you know what, keep asking those questions. And if you ever get into a church who doesn't allow you to ask those questions, find another church. Because if he gave me the apologetic argument at the time, I would have walked out and I wouldn't be, involved in the church. So since that time, I started doing mission work right away in Haiti, Guatemala, was baptized in Guatemala, Young Life. I went up to the mountains in Young Life. And I'm here saying, wow, okay, I'm a Christian now, all this stuff's going to come together for me. And that's really not God's plans in a lot of ways. So 5 years ago, right about now, while walking my dog in downtown Stamford, I felt I got stabbed in the back, and I had my first massive medical issue, and I had a complete type A aorta dissection. And that's where your aorta splits from the top all the way down to your femoral artery. And the vast majority of people die from that immediately. Fortunately, Stanford Hospital just started that surgical skill. And I was on the table within hours. St. Paul's was going on theology up at Stanwich along with Trinity at the time. They all stopped and prayed for me while I was on the operating table and, beat the odds at that time. Came out of it and feeling great. And 4 months later, a piece of glue from the debris got stuck in my femoral artery. I thought it was something else, but by the time they detected it, I had emergency surgery, and they were going to have to amputate my leg. To save the leg, they cut into what's called fascia wounds, which are deep wounds that are cut in to bleed you out. Saved my leg when I woke up, but lost a lot of blood and put me in a coma for 8 days. And a serious coma on life support. And this is where I can honestly tell you, I had my one true experience with in the presence of Jesus. And I was in a coma, and during that time, you're in a constant dream state. And it was a lot of evil stuff going on. So all my dreams were negative and evil, around my children being suffering, and I can't help them, so on and so forth. Excuse me. And then as the story goes, Chuck Davis had visited me in the hospital, and I didn't know it. I was in this coma. And he had sensed an evil presence of death. And he's up there praying against evil at Stanford Hospital, and the Caribbean women who are sitting by my bedside are up with him, praying against all this stuff in Stanford Hospital. And God as my witness, the next morning, I felt an incredible peace. It was as pitch dark as you can get, as quiet as you can get. And I felt this power, this presence next to me. And then for my benefit alone, he brought in these stars, and white stars came in counterclockwise from the right and red from the left. And it was such a powerful and peaceful presence that I knew I was in the presence of the God. And I woke up 3 times from that and went back to that state, just not wanting to leave it. I literally woke up, and the next day I walked out of that hospital. And 3 months later, I'm up on the mountain with Peter's son at 10,000 feet with Young Life, climbing the mountains with the kids. So it's kind of been my life. And then I started getting into Haiti. I run an orphanage in Haiti called Operation Love the Children of Haiti. Originally, it was going to be just the CEO of the 501c3. And then you get deeper and deeper, and you end up half my life down there as the executive director, fighting against real corruption. And Michael will certainly know in these third world countries, Haiti is one of the worst in terms of trying to do good down there. But we were making so much progress. We had so much support from Trinity and Stanwich, and then the Army and Navy, and different all sorts of programs helping us. And a year ago, we thought we had broken through. Wouldn't pay any extortion payments, and we were at a high, and a bunch of reasons. And my management team in Haiti were on a high. They felt great. We had 50 employees, Haitian women, who were making $8 a day, which was good for them down there. And 15 armed men with machine guns came in, broke into the place, arrested my entire management team, and basically threw me out. Bogus charges, because we had just won a court award, and they were going to give us this property back that we had, and so it was related to that. So, I struggle with these kids praying every night, and when they pray, they're on fire. And they're just praying to go to school and simple meal, and yet for some reason their prayers aren't answered, but mine are. So where I am in May of this year, I had to make the determination that I never went out to my investment bank and private equity crowd for money, because I never had the confidence that this was sustainable long term. And so I wasn't going to ask money from non-Christians, business people, unless I was highly confident that this organization was sustainable. So I went out to about 20 of them in May, saying I have 2 paths to go. One, either I have to get bigger, and so one of you gentlemen that I went out to that are worth a couple $100 million, I need some real support to make this work, or I need to get back into the investment banking world and use my own provision to help these kids along the way until something happens. And I had a lot of momentum on both sides, and almost my story feels like Job-like. I was in Boston interviewing at a very senior level at a firm. I had a great interview in the morning at a vice chairman level. Afternoon, I went up to Back Bay to have lunch with a private equity person. Walking back to the interview in the afternoon, I literally get hit by a truck crossing the street. And I ended up on top of the truck, hit in the back, and thrown into the street. I remained on my feet. It was the first miracle is why I wasn't dragged under that truck. But long story short, I ended up at Tufts Medical Center, where my aorta went from 4 centimeters to 6 centimeters, which in an aneurysm, which means it's going to blow up any day. So in the last 6 weeks, I've gone through these 2 major surgeries. And statistically, again, I've defied the odds. And I think the only reason I have is because of the church. The church meaning the people of these churches, whether it's Trinity Stanwich or other people, and the amount of prayers I receive. And when you don't have, I lost both my parents in the last 2 years, both in mid-70s, to my mother to ALS and my father to a massive heart attack. So when you don't have an infrastructure, you kind of feel, you feel a little vulnerable. And I have to tell you, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, I have never felt more protected and more loved by my church family. And so things like New Canaan Society, I have this men's group I'm with Trinity, which is so powerful to me. But to have those sort of networks of groups around you, they're going to get you through. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 months. I think I've gotten through this tough time. But to have these men in particular around you praying for you, It's pretty damn powerful. So that's my testimony.